everybody, this is Team Thoms, and today we're going to talk about what does it take to write an offer.
So you've walked through a house and you've decided that this could be the one, and you want to write an offer. So now we need to come together and talk about all the different components that it takes to write a winning offer.
Because a lot of people think it's just price, but there's a lot more to it than just price.
There's so many variables and points of consideration. We get back from our showing and we'll send you an email to say, hey, these are the things that we need to know from you in order to write this offer. And then we want to plan a phone call to continue discussing those things.
What are the things we need to know?
That's a great question. So we need to talk about offer price. How do we know what to offer on a house?
Well, we want our offer to be competitive, but we also don't want it to be too high. We don't want it to be too low. So how do we arrive at that number? Well, for one thing, we're going to call the agent. We're going to call the agent on the other side, and we're going to ask, what is your client looking for in an offer? We're going to run the comps. We're going to see what has sold in the area recently, or if there hasn't been a lot sold in the area recently, we're going to look back 6 months, sometimes even a year, to figure out how much is this house worth.
So you mentioned running the comps. What does that mean?
Well, what we'll do is we will take the property that you're looking for and we'll put it into one of our programs. We have a couple different programs that will run it through. And it'll look at things like how many bedrooms are there? How many bathrooms are there? How many square feet are there? It'll look at the area. Some areas, the price of the houses changes pretty dramatically from just one block to the next. So if you're downtown, you don't necessarily want to look a half a mile circumference on that house, because a half a mile away can be a completely different neighborhood. But if you're buying a farmhouse, you might have to put that search out to be 2 miles to find a comp. And so what we're going to do, we're going to find all of those comparable properties, and we're going to look at them. We're going to see what's the same and what's different, and we're going to compare them, and we're going to figure out what is this house worth.
A big piece of it, though, when it's a very competitive market, is like, well, how much do you want it? They have the house listed at this price. We know that there are multiple offers. And so it really comes down to, we've looked at the comps, but how much is this house worth to you? The next thing that we're going to discuss is the earnest money. Now, a strong amount of earnest money, I should say, earnest money is like your good faith deposit, and this is held by the title company or the real estate company, but not by us personally.
If we put that in our bank account, we will be arrested.
That's true.
We're not holding that money.
No, but the earnest money is like money to let the seller know, hey, I'm serious. I want this house, and I'm willing to kind of put money in holding to let you know how serious I am. And a really good, solid amount of earnest money is 1% of the purchase price. Now, you decide on your earnest money. We have buyers who put no earnest money. We have buyers who put $250, $500, $5,000. That is a lever that we can pull to show the seller how serious you are about this house.
What happens to the earnest money?
Well, that's a good question. And it all depends on what the contract says.
So what happens to the earnest money? Well, generally speaking, if you make it to closing, that earnest money is then put towards the closing cost.
It comes back to you as the buyer. It
comes back to you.
Now, if you decide to walk away from this house altogether for no reason whatsoever, the seller could petition to get to keep your earnest money. And so you have to know that going into it, that you could lose your earnest money. Both parties have to sign off when it's released, if it's released before contract close. The next thing that we need to discuss is the title company. Buyers get to choose the title company. Most buyers don't really have a strong preference on title company. We have a few title companies that we work with on a very regular basis, and so we can recommend a title company, but it's up to the buyer.
Prices on title companies generally pretty standard. Most title companies are going to do about the same thing for about the same price, and so a big factor is location. Where do you want to close?
Yeah, that's true. The offer expiration. So how long is your offer open for the seller to consider?
1 hour.
1 hour. Oh, that's aggressive. That's aggressive. In some instances, that might be appropriate, but most instances, we're leaving the expiration open for 12 to 24 hours. Sometimes as much as 3 days, depending on the situation.
Yeah, there are some situations where you need to leave it open longer. For instance, if it's an estate and there are multiple people who need to sign off on it, or there are some corporations who require a longer expiration date because they have to have lawyers sign off on it.
The next thing to consider is inclusions and exclusions. What is included in the purchase? What is excluded in the purchase?
You walk in the house, it's full of junk. Do you want this junk? Maybe. Maybe you say, well, it'd be easier if they didn't have to get rid of this stuff and I'll take care of it. And you say, everything included.
Mm-hmm. What about if the seller has specified like they want to keep their chandelier, or they have a bathroom mirror that they really want to keep?
That's important because if it is attached to the house, it goes with the house.
It is assumed that it goes with the house.
Unless you put it in writing that it doesn't. So what we say is if you took the whole house and you tipped it upside down, anything that fell is not included with the house. And so your dishwasher, would that fall? No, that's included with the house. But your table, that would fall, not included unless specified.
The next point of consideration is how are you financing this purchase? We assume that everybody is paying cash unless they tell us that they're financing the purchase. And we don't like make that assumption and not ask any questions. But across the board, we assume cash unless they tell us otherwise, and then we discuss that.
Yes, other common loans are conventional, FHA, VA, and USDA.
Sellers like to see your proof of funds and or your pre-approval letter with the offer. Again, it lets them know that you're serious and that you have the funds in order to make the purchase and make the offer that you're to complete the purchase. Contingencies. Is your purchase contingent on the sale
of your own house?
Of your own
Maybe
house?
you live in a house, you want to buy a new house, but you haven't sold your old house yet. A contingency in the contract can be that the purchase of the new house is contingent on the sale of the house that you're currently in.
The inspection contingency is one of the contingencies we need to consider. And one of our levers that we can pull and one of our pieces that we put in our contract is how long of an inspection window do you have? A very typical common inspection window is between 7 and 10 days. The shorter, the better typically for the seller. The more time can be better for the buyer. And there's different things that we can say around the inspection as well.
Yeah, so if you really want this house and it's a very competitive market, there are people who will waive the inspection altogether. We don't recommend that, but maybe you're a contractor and you walk through the house and you know, like it's your business and you know what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. You could waive the inspection altogether, and that eliminates that negotiation period in the contract. Or you could say that you're not going to ask for anything in the inspection that costs less than, say, $1,000 to fix. So if you see a light switch that's not working properly and it costs $35 to fix or $100 to fix, you're not going to ask the seller to fix that. You're just going to say, we'll take care of it. But what that does do is it allows you to get out of the contract or to negotiate the contract if there's something major wrong with the house. For instance, it needs a new roof, there's foundation issues, the HVAC isn't working, or other major issues like that.
A lot of times sellers just want to know that you're not going to nickel and dime them. You're not going to, pick apart their house. A lot of the houses, especially in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, they've been around for a while. They've seen things. The sellers want to make sure that they're not going to go with your offer and then through the inspection window be picked apart and lose money and lose money and lose money. So the inspection window is one thing. The inspection contingency is another thing. Closing cost. Are you asking the seller to pay your closing costs?
What are the closing costs?
Well, the closing costs are part of your loan, and they include things that arise through the loan origination. They come from the title company as well. The buyer has their closing cost and the seller has their closing cost. So seller paid concessions or seller paid closing cost are the seller paying your closing cost, the buyer's closing cost. And it's important to know that asking the seller to pay your closing cost does take away from the offer price or their net proceeds.
Sure. So if the house is, your offer price is $250,000 and you ask for $5,000 in seller paid closing costs, your offer is essentially $5,000 less. It's $245,000.
A strategy that you could use is say that the house that you want is $225,000, but you want to ask for $5,000 in closing cost. you could say, I'll offer $230,000. That way the seller is still netting the same amount.
And what that allows a buyer to do is it allows them to walk away from the closing table with more cash in their bank account.
Yeah, which is what a lot of sellers have as a goal in mind. Another thing that we're considering and putting into the offer is the buyer's preferred closing date. And typically, if you're financing a purchase with a loan, this is going to be between 30 and 45 days.
But we've actually done a closing as quick as, I believe, 7 days, where it was a cash buyer and they were able to get through the whole process and the closing within 1 week.
Yeah.
So it is possible.
It is possible. And there are lenders who will pre-qualify you so much that you might be able to close just in the time that the title is cleared and able to be transferred over. So just a couple weeks.
But what you have to figure out is, when does the seller want to close? And so maybe the seller has moved out of the house and they would like to close it as soon as possible because they want that money as quickly as possible. But there are also instances where they still live there and they're looking for a house, or maybe they're moving out of town for a job and there's a specific date when they're planning on moving. And so some extended occupancy or a longer closing date would benefit the seller. And we can put that into the offer if that works for both of you, because that could be an incentive for the seller to take your offer, because they want to stay in the house for 45 days. And so 30 days is going to leave them without a place to stay for 15 days, and that's going to be a big cost for them. So that's something that we consider.
Another thing that we're going to talk through is, do you want to purchase title insurance? Now, I've been through situations as an agent that cause me to always recommend title insurance, because I've seen it really protect the seller when they go to sell their house and maybe title issues pop up that were unforeseen, whether it's child support liens or mechanical liens.
Tax liens.
Tax liens. Yeah. So if there are liens on the property that weren't found through the title search, the title insurance could protect you and cover those. So we do recommend them. It's a one-time fee that you pay to the title company, and it protects you for the lifetime of the time that you own the house. The next one that we're going to talk through are the names that you're going to put on the deed. So what names will the house be under? If you're married, this is typically both people. Some people like to put their children on the deed. Some people like to write the deed as a transfer on death deed. So they're putting themselves as the primary owner, but then they have a separate paper that specifies that it's a transfer on death to whoever they would like to.
This is also a fun opportunity for the real estate agent to find out the real name of their clients, because maybe your client is Big Tom and you've always known Big Tom, and then you find out that this guy is William the Third. And you're like, William the Third, all right, Big Tom.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is going back a little bit, but there's this thing called an escalation clause. Do you want to talk about what an escalation is?
Sure, an escalation clause is an interesting lever. And so what that is say you offer $250,000 on the house. But in your heart of hearts, you could pay more. You don't want to pay more, but you could pay more. And so what you say is, I have an escalation clause. I will pay $250,000 up to $280,000. And how the escalation clause is triggered is with a higher offer. Someone comes in with a competing offer of $270,000. Well, suddenly your $250,000 offer isn't any good, except you have an escalation clause. And what that does is it says, I will beat your $270,000 by whatever the increment is you say $2,000. So now instead of $250,000, your offer is $272,000, putting you $2,000 ahead of the competing offer.
Mm-hmm. And with an escalation clause, it specifies that the competing offer has to be shown, and it can be a good way to win the offer. It can also be, we have to consider though, it does show your cards. It says, I really want this house. I'm willing to offer this much money. And sometimes the seller will just counter with your highest offer, even without showing you a competing offer.
Yeah, they'll say, oh, you'll pay $280? Okay, pay me $280.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say, no. Or you can say, I really want this. Let's do it.
Yeah. So those are the different levers that we pull and that we discuss when writing an offer. Again, after we walk through the house, you've decided that you really want to make an offer, we'll send you this email again to remind you of all the things we need to discuss. We'll have a phone call with you. We'll write the terms up. We'll send it to you. You have time to review it and discuss again and again as many times as needed for you to feel confident in writing this offer and sending it over. So again, I'm Molly.
And I'm Dan.
And we are Team Thoms. Please like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you soon.